Yeah, so everyone, thanks for being here. I'm glad we're recording it because I know quite a few people weren't able to make it around finals. So if you're watching this in a few hours or a few days once you get through studying, what's up? Hope they go well. Everyone else that is here, thanks for making the time for this. Really excited for an in-depth conversation, really about kind of how Nick got to his career in developer relations, as well as what that actually looks like on a day-to-day basis. And I think we're going to uncover a lot of things around that career path that people do not realize in terms of, both the sort of work that gets done as well as how demand it's becoming in the market. So Nick, maybe just kick us off and tell us a little bit about, where were you 2 years ago? And then, what are you doing now?
Yeah, great intro, Drew. So thank you. For everybody, I'm Nick Stanford. I'm a developer relations specialist currently working with IOG, stands for Input Output Global. If you're familiar with the blockchain and Web3 space, we are the engineering arm for the Cardano blockchain, right? They're sort of separate things, but we focus on building out the tooling and all the things that developers need to be successful building on Cardano. So to backtrack a little bit from that, 2 years ago, maybe a little more, I was working through my software engineering curriculum and I started doing some outreach and like just sort of participating in programs that I thought were exciting for me. Web3 has always been an interesting point of conversation. I think I started where most people do, where they say, what is this Bitcoin thing, right? It's all over the news. You hear tons of things about it and you say to yourself, what is this? I should probably know what this is. So I asked myself that question, and then I started going down that rabbit hole. So I first understood what is Bitcoin and then started working on smart contract platforms. And the ability to actually embed applications inside of a blockchain layer one in this sort of decentralized manner was really exciting to me. I've got a background in traditional software engineering and functional programming, working with languages like Haskell and things like this. But the interest for me was always in emerging technologies. Web3 was a really big one for me. So I started asking questions, right? And I started figuring out where are the programs that I could get involved with. And I ended up in a Blockbeam program. I know a lot of you from that program. So I really love to see everybody's faces after so much time. It's such an interesting sort of perspective for me. But I went through the Blockbeam program and asked as many questions as I possibly could. Turn around the end of that Blockbeam program, and we all sort of met at this public it wasn't a hackathon, it was maybe call it a Web3 conference, right? For this platform. This platform is called Reach, and Reach is a programming language that focuses on smart contracts and the paradigm of smart contracts and lowering the barrier to writing more simple code and sort of bringing this to the masses, right? Because in the early days, and still a lot of the technology today is reserved for advanced level software engineers. You're talking senior level people, you're talking PhD level people, things like this. So bringing it back to somewhere where users like you and I could actually do these things, right? So I have loved so far to work in the Web3 space. Blockbeam did it great about opening me up to like speaking with people and getting some of my public presentation skills up. But after that Reach conference, we all sort of decided like, hey, this relationship's going somewhere, right? So I started working with Blockbeam through one of their Gateway to Algorand programs, and I also started working with Reach. I went in through one of their boot camps, and then towards the end of the boot camp, they hired me full time to work in their community. From that experience, I maybe did 17, 18 months in that role. And then I was approached by IOG to sort of join their team and start working on Cardano blockchain. So for me, it's been about fortune of opportunity, right? I've had some really good fortune to have some of these opportunities just kind of laid out to me, and then I've capitalized on them. So that's where my story sort of starts and how I got to where I am today and the role that I'm currently filling.
Very cool. So definitely a maze of things, but I think, just from knowing you for, a lot of the journey, I think, what kind of drove you forward was obviously like the asking a ton of questions and the constant optimism really with everything you do. So, it's not shocking to me to see how quickly you've progressed and your career's taken off. Very cool to see, just as an aside. But can you tell us a little bit about what IOG actually is and maybe just touch on like the scope of that company?
Yeah, sure. So IOG, I briefly mentioned, is the engineering arm of the Cardano blockchain. So if you're familiar with Web3 at all, there's like these isolated sort of silos. The blockchain itself is one silo, the blockchain foundation is another silo, and a lot of times you have that core team building out the engineering infrastructure. However, that's completely separate in Cardano with IOG. IOG is strictly an engineering outfit. I'll pause there. We're strictly an engineering outfit. For the time being, we are completely focused on building infrastructure and tooling for the Cardano blockchain. Now, a lot of the tools that we build are completely agnostic. And when I say agnostic, that means it works for Cardano, but it also works for other blockchains. And it's sort of a future vision thing, in that right now, today, you couldn't take the code that I use on Cardano and use it on Bitcoin. But in the future, you could do something like that. So as far as scope, IOG is responsible for all of the tooling that you see, any of the smart contract languages. If you're familiar with Cardano, there's Plutus, there's you can write directly in Haskell, there's Marlowe, things like this. We're responsible for building out the tooling behind those, and then also building out developer relations programs, which is how do we get people to use our thing, right? Like that's the number one thing for us in DevRel. How do we get people to use this? And then how do we also sort of be that centerpiece between the users and the engineering team? If any of you are familiar with engineering teams, they're maybe not the most public facing or the most sort of public friendly. Why is that? Because they're so far in the weeds in the thing that they're already doing. They don't want to have to come up for air to describe to the general public steps 1 through 30. The engineering team is on step 35 and they're off and running. They don't want to spend any time backtracking and sort of describing the steps as they exist to regular users. So part of my role specifically at IOG is to lay those steps out, to be the centerpiece between engineering and what I call, the general public. So, that is translating engineering speak into English, because not everybody, even, mid-level engineers don't quite speak engineering, right? That's a long, long path. So that's at least a little bit of the scope of what IOG covers. To say it a little more, IOG actually has, 8 or 9 different silos that we're currently building. We're building Midnight, which is like a privacy blockchain, right? We're building Marlowe, which is a smart contract language that's blockchain agnostic. We're building any number of other tools at one time. So it really is a conglomeration of the best engineers across the world building the most advanced tools in Web3. Myself, particularly, I focus on Marlowe, which is a low-code solution that, like I said, is blockchain agnostic. But other than that, I can tell you the engineering team at IOG is super busy. So
Yeah, totally. And so, just drilling down on a few things, like it seems like a big part of your job is to kind of tell people the why, like get developers excited about what they're building, and just, there's obviously thousands of other places they could be building, even, just in Web3, but even beyond, they could be focusing on anything. So can you talk about your personal process of, maybe figuring out what's exciting about a technical solution and then being able to, broadcast that to a community?
yeah, I can definitely do that. It's going to be underwhelming for you though, because it's what's exciting to me, literally. I mean, I work through this thing like a user and I find the points that are exciting to me. What is the thing that makes this stand out? And then you have to be able to expand upon that and talk about why it's exciting. For example, one of the demos that I just finished finalizing today is for a new TypeScript SDK for the Marlowe language. So prior, you used to have to like write Marlowe in this custom way. You used to have to deploy your own runtime and do all these fancy things to write smart contracts on Cardano. Now with the TypeScript SDK, you build a regular Web 2 application. You say npm install at marlowe.io. You bring in some packages from that TypeScript SDK, and now you can add Web3 functionality, and you've spent maybe half a day on it. So when I worked through that, and I knew what was the prior process to getting, maybe a smart contract completely deployed and interacted with, I worked through the TypeScript SDK. And in my head, I'm working through this as a user, thinking, wow, what what an exciting tool. I can do what? And then my videos are just sort of playing on those excitement points. I find what are those most exciting points, and then I'll stand in front of the camera and say, do you believe it does this? And users sort of watch my videos and they get that excitement from me, but it's because of the way that I approach it. And I approach it like a user does. Try to strip away any of your preconceived notions about what this thing should be, what should it do, what exists currently, and be able to talk about the thing that excites you for this new technology. And for me, that's always been an easy thing. I'm very outspoken, right? So I'm very loud in my emotions. So it's really done well for me in my videos and in all of my DevRel roles to capture the excitement that I find while I'm at my VS Code window, and then turn it into this sort of demonstration for how, why, what. And those are, they're really common points. I mean, you could look at any typical marketing jargon and see, what is this thing? Why do we need it? How do you use it? But inside of that, like, there needs to be some real authenticity for what you're saying is something you believe in, because if it's not, users can snuff that out from a mile away. You don't want to be another face up there just sort of reading a script, right? You want to be able to be excited about the things that you see that are useful. So, that's my long-winded approach in response to that question. My short-winded approach and response is be excited, approach it like a user does. Find out what are their pain points beforehand. And if this tool erodes away those pain points, sing about it. They love to hear it, right?
No, I think it's easier said than done. I think a problem, that we definitely see engineers kind of consistently run into is that, like, very granular thinking, where it's engineers are obsessed with, how do I make that connection? How do I go A to B to C to D to E to F? Where you're only going to have people's attention for, you're at A, how do you get to F? And drilling down on really, those important features. Like, was that a challenge for you to kind of, obviously have an engineering background, to be able to, teach yourself to kind of speak at that higher level and, communicate at that higher level?
Yeah, so it was, in a certain sense, the imposter syndrome is real. Like, part of the problem that I see with DevRel, or I shouldn't call it a problem, I should just call it a hurdle to get over, is that you're typically working with tools that are not well documented. You're on the cutting edge of this thing, right? They brought you in as a DevRel specialist to talk about this new product. Well, part of the problem with new products, documentation, examples. So you need to be really comfortable in your technical understanding to be able to work through those things and then speak about them. So in terms of, working through them, I felt really comfortable after my software engineering curriculum. Gosh, they put you through, I think I learned 15 languages in college, and I don't use any of them anymore, but I think we touched on like 15 different languages. So to step into a new technology and learn it, that felt normal. The other part that I think a lot of people might not feel normal with is the public facing portion of it. So many years ago, when I was a young man, I worked as a safety coordinator for a sand mine, the largest silica sand mine in the entire world. And I was the safety coordinator. So I had to stand in front of these large groups and give safety presentations on topics that I absolutely despised. Who wants to stand up there and talk about lockout tagout for an hour? You don't want to do it, and your audience does not want to hear it. Those guys are only there because they're getting paid. Now, I feel really comfortable having done that, because it is a difficult task to speak about something you're not interested in. On the flip side, if you're interested in a thing, it's really easy to talk about. So I took the sort of public speaking and soft skills that I learned from that job, applied them to this thing that I'm passionate about, and that's sort of the aggregation of those two things, like coming to be in this really unique role that is DevRel. Part of what they tell you in software is to find a niche, be this niche programmer. DevRel is a really tight niche. There are not a ton of DevRel experts out in the world. So if you can position yourself as someone who is, capable of doing these sort of public speaking events, doing these, public facing presentations, maybe even literally speaking live. It's sort of funny. This whole role maybe was very different 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But today I stand in front of my camera. Like I said, I'm half dressed. You guys see this really nice collar. I still got my sweatpants and my loafers on. But if I'm in front of an audience on stage, oh boy, the number one fear in the entire world is public speaking. So if you're afraid of getting up there and speaking, you're not alone, right? So we have it really cushy in terms of this sort of remote work environment. But I think being able to build on the skills that you have now and focus on what are the things that you need to succeed in a role like this, you can set yourself up day one to step out and be a really successful person. You really just have to sort of quiet that imposter syndrome. And I'm not sure if everybody gets it or I'm just speaking personal experience, but you really have to be able to quiet that and stand on top of the things you do know and be confident in the things you say. So, really, I think the public speaking aspect of my early career and then the excitement of the technical aspect of what I do now builds on this thing that what it is today. And for me, that's hopefully a really long career in developer relations.
From the sandhill to the blockchain. That could have been a really good title for this event. Yeah, and I think, you're definitely not the only one that gets imposter syndrome. I think it's something that everyone struggles with. On that note, does anyone want to jump in and ask Nick a question?
Feel free. I'm really good at winging it. Bring it on.
Yeah,
What do you got?
open conversation. Emily, how many languages do they have you learning at UF? How many have you learned since college?
Um, I can list them because I don't know. So there's HTML, there's CSS, the basics, right? And also some of these are like you learn on your own, right? And like they don't teach you a few and like you gotta learn web dev. So there's like Node, uh, Express. Those aren't languages, but like same thing. Full
It
on
counts.
MERN stack. Whatever, okay, MERN stack, like C++, C, like assembly. I don't know why we need assembly. It's just like 12-ish is a lot.
It's a lot. To be fair, I count frameworks as languages because sometimes they have more than an actual language. Like a language has types.
Yeah, I
It's
know it's like the same thing.
yeah, like React. Like React has this strange thing where you have to learn that it constantly renders to the DOM. So if you want something to happen once, well, there's a function for that. Wait, what? I only programmed it once. Yeah, but the site is continuously doing this thing. Okay, well, now this is some abstract thought out in this React world, right? But to expand on that, the languages that you learn in college are great for giving you the foundation. They do not teach you the thing you're probably going to work with for the rest of your life. I didn't learn a lick of JavaScript while I was in school. Zero classes, nothing, right? I get out of school, that's all I do. JavaScript and TypeScript, that's it. And, I put that into React application. So I shouldn't say that's it. But my point is, what are you trying to do? If you want to be a web developer, there's a bunch of stuff you're going to have to learn after school. So you got to come to terms with that. They're not going to teach you the full web stack while you're working in school. So if you have a passion for it, try to build on that and learn as you continue to go things that are outside of your curriculum, because the curriculum is there to give you a foundation. And it did really well for me for that. I think what it did best was, like I said, trying to approach new languages and tools. I felt like, wow, I've done this 100 times. Where's the documentation? Okay, how do they handle typing? How do they handle this? How do they handle that? And it was simple for me to learn how to learn a new language after going through 15 of them in school, assembly being one of them. I think I got a B in that class, or maybe even a C if I'm being honest. But I don't use assembly anymore. But I understand how assembly works. And the beauty of abstraction and software engineering is that we don't have to write assembly anymore. So you're right, Emily. You take that in, give it just a small space in your brain, and then let it flow out. You don't really.
Yeah. But actually,
With that
one
said,
fun
go
fact
ahead.
about assembly, I'm taking a music tech class and there's a class using assembly for music. So like
Wow.
that's kind of like the happy way of using assembly. For those who don't know what assembly is like it's considered like a low level programming language. So like it basically looks like a bunch of junk that doesn't make sense, like logically, so that your computer understands it better. And it's like it's weird, but I mean it's useful in some cases, but that's for like people that are like really like want to do things with like computer engineering and that type of stuff, less like developer focused.
Yeah, sort of. So if you want to be an assembly developer, you'll make a ton of money. If that's what you're after, I'm in programming for the money. Learn assembly. There's not that many people that do it, and that's why the salaries are high. But when I talk about abstraction in software engineering, the computer only ever speaks on, off. We say ones and zeros, but all the ones and zeros are signals saying on, off, on, off. And you're out, I mean, your computer's literally taking the power signal and going on, off in a pattern that has been translated into assembly language. So the first computers ever had to be built in assembly because that's all the computer spoke was on, off, on, off. But as we've gotten better at engineering software, we build something on top of that. So on top of assembly is maybe a language like Python, where the functions, the words you use, it looks a little more like English, very much still a coding language, but it breaks down to assembly. So we built a piece that interprets your Python and turns it into assembly. And then we built a piece on top of that. And that piece makes it easier to write Java on top of Python or JavaScript in your web languages, and breaks that all down into assembly. Eventually, everything in the world breaks down to assembly. There's a funny joke in programming that C runs the entire world, and it does because all of the hardware that you're familiar with runs C code. We say firmware is this small piece of software that's like plugged onto a hardware device. Your Wi-Fi router that most of you are probably on today has code that lives on it. That code is firmware. That code is probably written in C by someone who makes a lot of money. So if your goal in programming is to make money, learn those low-level languages. There's a dime a dozen for web developers. There are not many low-level programmers because it's difficult to understand. We built abstraction layers to make it easier for people. So if you're one of the people who can work down here, you're going to make more money. That's for sure.
Awesome. I love the flow of this conversation. We're like in the weeds and then coming back up, just as a DevRel should. And Guy, so I see that you've got, marketing on your background there, but you're obviously at a pretty technical company. Do you have any parallels with what, Nick's been talking about? Is there anything that you relate to?
So I find it really interesting what he's saying regarding the knowledge of different types of programming languages, because that develops your thought process. And technology is changing so fast and new things are coming to the market at a pace that it's always going to increase. So I come from an engineering background, and a lot of the stuff that I studied in engineering, I never used in my life. But I feel what you say because that's the right thing. When you're in school, you might not give a lot of value to that boring exercise or thing that you're studying, but somewhat things fit in the right way inside of your head, and you're a better professional afterwards, and you carry that for life. So I cannot say much about the technical side because that's not my area, but I agree 100% with Nick.
Yeah, I mean, and really when I say that, it's about making yourself, marketable is a bad word for me, but making yourself marketable. I mean, I can't say when I get into these interviews and I talk about the programming languages that I've used in the past, I used Prolog, Scheme, and PLP assembly for like a semester, but I can stand there and talk about how it works. I couldn't write you a full program. I probably couldn't do anything useful with it, but I can speak about it and understand it, which lets people know and typically the interviewers or, the company you're interviewing with, it lets them know that you're comfortable with abstract concepts. Everything in software engineering is way out there. What did I just say? Everything's a 1 or a 0. And we've built this crazy stuff on top of it that lets you do, gosh, anything in the world. So if you can articulate that you understand what abstraction is or what these concepts are, I mean, it's the same reason why in college, as we're going through it, we say, why am I taking calculus? I'm never going to use this. But then when you go into an interview and they see you pass Calc 3, Calc 4, they don't care if you know about integrals and derivatives. They care that you can understand abstract concepts. So no, I write a bunch of programming. I don't really use that much calculus. I mean, I might add a couple numbers together. I might map an array out or do something like that, but it's not like this really far in-depth calculus, calculations like you see maybe in movies, right? The guy's got like shadows of equations and formulas coming out of his brain while he's programming. That's not really how it is. So what I'm saying there is like, be in those classes, understand that maybe you're never going to use it in the future, but try to understand what they're putting out to you so that you could talk about it in the future. Because the reason I'm here today is my ability to talk about abstract concepts. And that's the bottom line, really.
Awesome. Yeah. So if we had to, so definitely a question we want to get answered like throughout this call is just like, how did you get yourself most prepared for this sort of role, Nick? So in terms of skill set, definitely like learning languages to be technical enough to be dangerous and kind of to learn how to even speak the right language. Second one I definitely picked up on is public speaking, the ability to get in front of a group, make your ideas heard. I think third one I heard is the ability to kind of like break things down to kind of separate the forest from the trees in terms of what people actually care about. What am I missing?
No, I mean, those are all great pieces for building out your skill set. The part that is not often talked about is networking. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the connections that I made, because you could sit behind your computer and learn every language the world has to know. If you don't know anybody, you're never going to go anywhere with that. So expand your network as early and as often as you possibly can. If you get someone that reaches out to you, which happens in DevRel roles, follow up on that. Like it may seem, I'm not, there's nothing here for me. That person, if you can help them for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is, that person's forever in your corner. I still have people who I've helped through troubleshooting issues, reviewed their resumes, helped them submit or review a proposal of some kind, that still I speak to every day. People who come back to me and say, hey, man, thank you so much for that. By the way, I'm working on this new thing. Would you like to be involved? So yeah, your technical understanding is a must. I mean, I don't think I'm reinventing the wheel when I tell you that. You need to understand the thing you're trying to speak about. So learn what they're telling you in college, know where you want to go, figure out what are the things I need to learn technically in that space, but then also network. Connect with people that are already in that space. If you follow someone who maybe puts out a lot of content on YouTube, right? Let's say they're like a freelance developer relations type person. They just put out a bunch of demo videos on YouTube. I would bet that person is willing to talk to you if you reached out to them, because that's how they built their entire brand, right? And maybe you don't need a personal brand, but you definitely need people in your corner. And that, I think, is the piece that as a young man, I thought I could take the whole world on and I didn't need anybody. I could do this all myself. I'm so good at what I do. But when it really came down to brass tacks, it was about who am I connected with that can present these opportunities that I can help through something, because otherwise you're just this, great software engineer sitting behind your computer. And you could stand there and put in Indeed applications for a year and never hear back once. But if you have a network of people that work in your corner, when something comes up, they're going to come to you. How do I know that? Because I'm on the other side of it. And every community I've ever managed, we have team meetings that sort of look like this meeting here. There's like 6 or 8 of us on that team meeting. And when we talk about the community, we all know the names of people who are active. So you may be just like putting a message in Discord that's, hey, if anybody else had a problem with this, here's how I solved it. I see that and I bring it up in my team meeting. So if you do that 4, 5, 6 times, and then the next question at our team meeting is, hey, we need a community manager. Hey, I know the perfect person, this person, because you're networking, you're publicly viewable. I used to be the absolute worst at this. Again, I thought I was like, oh, I could handle the whole world. But really, I'm more introverted than these presentations maybe make me seem, right? I love to just be up in my head. I love to really go down deep into the weeds into a topic. And I don't like to come up for air. So, one of the things that I'll speak about is like social media. I don't use it in my personal life. I don't really post on Facebook. I don't follow my friends. I don't use Twitter for anything outside of my professional career. I thought LinkedIn was the biggest joke I'd ever heard of. What? Professional networking, social media? Why do you need that? But in my professional career, I use every one of those things to build up who I am and the material that I put out. It's a showcase of what you've done, what are your talents, and what are your goals. And I've had, at least this year, I've probably had 6 interviews from people who've reached out to me just on LinkedIn and said, hey man, I saw all the stuff you've been posting. I see what you're working on. We'd love to have you part of our team. So use all of these tools to your advantage, even if in your personal life, like me, it's not I didn't like it. I mean, I sort of came up in the era that like Facebook really got big and social media really got big. And then all our parents started using it. And then we didn't want to use it anymore. And from that moment on, I was kind of like, I'm off of all this, right? But in your professional career, you must showcase the things that you're doing and be public about them. All of the things that I add to our GitHub repositories, none of you have ever seen, ever, right? But if I put out a video, a demonstration video, I post it on my Twitter, I post it on my LinkedIn. On my LinkedIn, I know 4 people here who would definitely react to that post. At least 5, 6 people who would react to that. So you have to be public and use these tools to your advantage, even if in your personal life you don't see it as a point of value, right?
No, getting yourself out there is definitely important. Any career in emerging tech, and something I do want to mention before we hop at 8:45 is Ryzen's going to be running a lot of these events in the fall. And, I know it's not always easy to DM someone on Twitter and DM someone on LinkedIn. It's easier for some people than others. Nick, maybe you're in that camp. But getting involved with, these programs where you're elevating yourself, or these, late night events where most people are maybe just working on homework or just, watching a movie, and getting out there and meeting the right people is super important. So you'll definitely look out for that, in the coming months. So I want to give a chance for anyone else to jump in with some questions, and I've got a few hard-hitting ones to end off with, Nick.
I'm almost intimidated, Drew.
Yeah.
If we had this so many
very
times, I'm almost
intimidating.
intimidated, huh? Feel free,
Awesome.
fire away.
All right, so let's talk work-life balance. What do you just tell us about a day in your life?
That's a great one. Early on, I was the absolute worst at this. I spent 15 hours a day working, and I would pop into the kitchen, make myself some terrible dinner, and then go back to my desk and work. That's not sustainable. I've seen some of the most intelligent people that I've ever worked with burn out from those schedules alone. So I had a friend I used to work with at the sand plant, actually, who said it to me like this: I work to live. I don't live to work. So inside of that, if you have something you're passionate about, by God, be passionate about it. Love what you do, but understand that this is a marathon, not a sprint. You must take care of yourself. So in the first year, that's how I worked. I got in a lot of trouble with my partner. Hey, you want to watch a movie? No, I'm busy. 8 o'clock on a Friday night, and I wouldn't leave my computer. But today, the way that I approach my work-life balance is like this. I do 4 hours in the morning from 7 to 11, and then I get up and I walk away. And in that 4 hours, I'm usually active. I'm at my standing desk here. I have a stationary bike that I ride while I like watch videos. If I need to have a little treadmill that goes under the desk, I can stand here and walk while I'm on my computer. 4 hours. And then I get outside, go out and do something. Something you're really good at would be great because it helps to take your mind off of that thought process of like, how do I do this thing? You can go out and do something you're really good at. Recently, one of the things that I've enjoyed doing is I live in a cabin in the Colorado mountains. One of the things that I really enjoy doing is going out and getting firewood. I take a chainsaw, I take my sled, I drag it with me out into the mountains, I cut a tree down and I drag it home. That's my like middle of the day thing. I eat lunch in there, I hang out with my partner if she's home, maybe I watch a little TV, play with the dogs, and then I come back for a second session. And typically I do, from 3 to 5, 3 to 6, something like that. And what it really does for me is it makes it feel like 2 different days for your tasks. So in the morning, there's some things that are maybe lingering from yesterday. There's like one big task you want to get done in that 4 hours. You do that. You walk away, you're not burnt out. You feel good about what you just did. You go do something you're already really good at. And now you're vibing now. You're feeling really good about the day. You're feeling great. You come back, you prepare a little bit for tomorrow, you knock out one more small task, and then you sign off. And I know this is being recorded, but maybe I'll do 7 hours is a long day. 6 hours is an average day. So, maybe don't tell my boss, but 6 hours is a good day for me. But it's about efficiency. Can you do the thing that needs to be done? And in my early days, a lot of those 15, 16-hour days, oh gosh, I would just sit here at the computer and like scroll aimlessly at things because I wasn't mentally home. So you got to take care of yourself mentally, physically, you got to eat well, and then you have to break up your days. You can't work forever, right? I mean, you're going to have to work for a portion of forever, but you can't work all the time forever. So make sure you find things you're good at and plug them into the middle of your day. If you're fortunate enough to work remotely, maybe you can go out into the mountains and grab some firewood. If you're not, maybe you can get away from your office, go out and have lunch somewhere you really enjoy. And it just helps your mind to sort of reset and block and sort of eliminate a lot of that stress that our day-to-day comes with.
That's awesome advice. And all right, so wrapping up here, at least with the main session. I mean, people are welcome to stay on after if they want to, or Nick, want to be respectful of your time. But if people want to stay and Nick's down to stay, then sounds good. But maybe just some parting words for the larger group, like, well wishes for next year. Any last words of advice? Let's end off on a high note.
I will end it off on this high note. So I told you a little bit about my backstory, where I come from. I'm literally living my dream. Resonate with that for a second. Every day I wake up, I do the exact thing that I want to do. I'm paid well. I'm rewarded well. I feel fulfilled in my life. You can have that, whatever it is. There's an interesting book that is very popular on Amazon, mostly because of the title. It's called The Universe Doesn't Give a About You. And the point of that is that the world is so big. There are so many opportunities. All you have to do is know what you want and go get it. The universe doesn't care enough to stop you from going and getting it. When I was working midnights in a sand plant, I always thought, man, I'd love to be a programmer. I'd love to work from home. I'd love to have my dogs in my office when I have my meetings. That's my day-to-day life now. So if you have something you're excited about, something you want to accomplish, there's nothing stopping you. Nothing. You want to learn a skill? It's never been easier to do that. You want an opportunity, like a remote work opportunity? It's never been easier to do that either. Whatever you're trying to do, now is the best time for you to do it. And you may come out the other side of it, sort of laughing and smiling like I do a lot, because you look around and go, how did I get here? How is this my day-to-day life? And I cannot say enough for how fulfilled it makes me feel. So whatever it is that you're shooting for, know that you can do it and you should do it. Nothing's stopping you. Go be awesome. Conquer the world. And I say that from my mountain cabin in the middle of nowhere, right?
Let's go get it, guys. Definitely on the right track. Being here at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday, you are putting in the work. Nick, thanks again for being here. Always awesome to catch up and hear you speak. Super inspiring story.
Yeah, thanks, Drew, for having me. I'd love to, come back some other time and speak more with you guys. I love doing these sessions. Thank you so much for all of you who I already know who attended this. It's great to see you all. It's been some time now. We need to catch up again in the future and see what we're all up to. This has so far been an incredible journey, and I look forward to it continuing.
Absolutely.